next speaker is the final U.S. Senate candidate, which is Robert Lucero.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to the Conejo Valley Republican Federated Women. I want to thank you for having this forum and for inviting candidates like myself and John and the others who are not, well, let me say, a lot of the county committees of the Republican Party are not inviting us to speak anymore because their bylaws prevent them from allowing the candidates that are not endorsed to speak. And I want to just address part of that. Was anybody at the California GOP convention this year? Okay, so a minority, despite the fact that the people that were here, and a lot of us are candidates. But there's a lot of infighting going on, let's put it that way. I won't get into it, but I'll just say that the Republican Party needs your help, our help, to get into stronger shape. I'm a new Republican. I was an independent. In my first election, I voted for Ross Perot in 1992. And then I got active with some other independent forces in the Democratic Party for a long time. But recently, I, in consultation with the leadership of the Republican Party in the state of California, I switched and I'm all in here. I think 2016 was a big watershed moment in terms of not just Trump's election, but also the fact that the Democratic Party was trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together after the DNC lost control of things when Bernie Sanders was close to taking the nomination there. So most people were voting in an independent kind of way in 2016, and that really hasn't gone away. So to add to some of the elements that John Allison and Dr. Hall had mentioned, we have a really good chance in this race to make this competitive. And I brought up the California GOP because in their training, I've gone through some of their Trailblazers training, which I do encourage people to get involved in. They, in their written program, did not even have the US Senate race on their radar. They had dismissed it as not an opportunity, not a potential. I think that's a huge mistake. As John said, Alex Padilla is not very well known in this state, and to the extent he is, he's known as mediocre to failure, basically. Kind of a straw man that was put up there by Gavin Newsom. So he's a giant target. The Democratic Party in general, as you know, is a giant target. So we actually can make this a competitive race. And with no disrespect to the other gentlemen in the room and other people that are actually running in this race, I do believe that my campaign is going to make this a competitive race in November if I can win the primary. You know, first of all, I'm fourth generation Californian. My family came from Arizona in the early 20th century, and before that had been in New Mexico. We're one of the founding families of New Mexico, the Lucero family. We were kicked out by the Indians in 1680 in the Pueblo Revolt, and then came back in 1706 and established Albuquerque, one of the 12 families that did that. But we're strong Americans. I mean, we got citizenship seven generations ago in my family after the Mexican War. My grandfather fought in Korea, and my great uncle, his older brother, was George Alvarado, whose Mexican mother had named him after George Washington. So, you know, this whole idea, part of the problem I have with the critical race theory is the fact that what it's undermining is that connection to the American Revolution. That each one of us in the room, as we breathe, our responsibility and our sacred trust is our relationship to the American Revolution, our relationship to 1776, and what that meant for not just this country, but for humanity. You know, I think the better element of what Reagan had done with Gorbachev was he had actually appealed to the better side of Gorbachev in bringing the Cold War to an end. And I think that's something we can actually do with countries that we see as enemies today. We can talk to countries like Russia and China, even though they're very different than us. We can appeal to their better nature. We can work with countries like Mexico, who should actually be a partner of ours. But, I got active in the early 90s in direct opposition to what was being called then the New World Order, which is the idea that there are no more borders, there's the end of the Cold War, and there's you know, a one world government, as was mentioned earlier now, a Newspeak bureau monitoring what we say and do. This is what we are fighting. This is what I am fighting. And to just get back to this race, this U.S. Senate seat and this race is so important. The U.S. Senate has been one of the most dysfunctional parts of our government for a long time. And we as Californians really should stop accepting the mediocrity of our Senate races and our Senate appointments in California. In fact, in 1992, my first election, we had Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein on the ballot that year. For the first time, two senators and two females running. We were supposed to all be dancing in the streets because it was two females running. Just like we in LA County are supposed to be dancing in the streets about having an all-female board of supervisors. Well, I have an update for you on that, by the way. They've done nothing to change what's happening in LA County. But we, for over 30 years, have let our senators, Feinstein, Boxer, Kamala Harris, and now this empty suit, Padilla, do nothing about what's happening in California and what's happening to the nation overall. One of the amazing things about running for federal office on this level is you get to talk big picture. You get to talk foreign policy. You get to talk about national policy. We have a lot of national issues that our senators are not doing enough about. And they, of course, play the blame game and all that in Washington. So we have to break that up. And I think we can do that. And I really want to address this finally as I'm speaking here. I want to mention just go back to the point that I think this seat is winnable by a Republican. And in my case, having been a Democrat, I was actually a Democratic campaign organizer and campaign manager. I know how to talk to these guys. And I'll tell you, I was a Robert Kennedy Democrat. I mean, I'm not old enough to go back to that campaign, but to the extent that I identify with the Democratic Party, it is that spirit of the Democratic Party. When I first got active in 1993 in the Democratic Party, we were fighting, my faction of the Democratic Party, we were fighting what was called then outcome-based education and political correctness. That was 30 years ago. So we were fighting what everybody is now seeing as an absolute horror show, as John mentioned, in our classrooms. You know, my 7-year-old daughter recently came home from school and said she was in a women's rights meeting in her second grade class. And I said to my wife, I said, well, are we allowed to discuss what's going on there? Like, what is this? So I'm all for women. I married one and we have a daughter and I have a mother. And what are we talking about in there? So we have some big issues, but I'd like to just close by saying I've been involved in these issues for a long time. I'm a consultant. I'm working on the homeless crisis here and internationally. Next month I'll be on a panel with my new colleague, Manny Pacquiao. I work for a nonprofit that's based in Manila, and he's their ambassador on homelessness in Manila, which if you don't know, they have a huge problem in Manila on this homeless issue. It's actually a global issue. And I'm the ambassador in the United States for development for the organization. So there's more I could say on that. There's some information on my website. But I wanted to thank you all for having me. And please forgive, I worked in Indian country for about 6 years, so I got used to going to political events in a Southwest outfit with a blazer and jeans. I'd go lobbying in Congress with tribal leaders, and this is as formal as it got. So thank you for having me, and let's get California back in the U.S. Senate with a Republican representative. Okay, thank you.